Hey guys, just wanted to make a quick video here. I just about, I think, crashed my tank, okay? So I'm gonna get into that, but before I do, for those of you guys that are new, I've been in the hobby exactly 14 weeks, and I've been documenting what's been happening week to week with the tank, as well as its progress. And essentially what's transpired here in the community, again, if you're new, you're going to have the opportunity to learn from more experienced seasoned reef keepers. Now, again, I'm only into it 14 weeks. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but our current state of the tank so far, so good. But let me get into this video. As I said, I nearly crashed the tank. Okay, so yesterday in the evening, I noticed our mushrooms here were completely closed up. You could actually see most of the rock. And also the torch had completely contracted in, as well as the hammer coral there on the top, and the zoas had fully closed up. So when I saw that, I was like, well, what's going on? Like, what haven't I been doing? Right. And guys, we've talked about the importance of keeping an eye on your tank, but also tracking your water parameters, but also your salinity levels. So again, the salinity in the water is how much salt concentration is actually in the water. So when I saw everything had fully closed up, it wasn't because of the lighting. I had been providing lights to the coral, and it wasn't an overwhelming amount of light because I had the blue lights on, and typically I maintain the blue light on to make sure that the coral themselves aren't getting too much lighting. As we see the coral on the rack, I am going to move those down because I don't want to bleach them. And thankfully, the zoas we see have reopened. But I'm telling you, yesterday evening, I was like, what is going on? This does not look good. My son actually said, Dad, is the torch, is it going to turn out the way the other torch did? And I said, hold on, let me check things out. So, of course, what I did was I pulled out my refractometer and tested the salinity in the water. Now, if you look, our water line, typically I maintain the water line maybe slightly above this line here, which allows me this much room to add and top up with fresh water. So for those of you guys that are new, typically you want to have the salinity levels between 1.020 to 1.025. And folks say that in order for your corals to do well, they should be somewhere in the 1.025 to 1.026 range. Now, when I checked my salinity, it was actually at 1.030. So it had gotten way too high. And the reason the coral had closed up was because they were under stress. And you can see here, and we can monitor this over the next week, the mushrooms themselves, they're not dissolving, but they have been impacted by the salinity. And what I've noticed after completing adding fresh water, they've started to open back up. And again, the color return. Same with the zoas. Same with the torch. Now, the torch, as I said, had completely contracted. I think the hammer was doing the best out of all of them, and even the zoas weren't liking it. And I understand, folks have told me to move this rack down, which I am, because I think the zoa, if you look at this zoa, it's doing far better because it's, lower in the tank. But that said, I may have made two mistakes. So I panicked, okay, and I topped up a fair bit of water. It was room temperature water, and I poured it in the back chamber here, okay? And we went from 1.030 after I did the initial top up to 1.027, okay? So I measured it again today. So actually, let's back up a second. So after doing that top up, within an hour, the salinity had gone from 1.030 to 1.027. And for those of you guys that are more experienced, I'm going to ask, is that too drastic of a salinity swing in a single day? Because, or it wasn't even a single day, let's say in a 2-hour span to bring, if your salinity is up at 1.030, you pour a bunch of water in, fresh water, and it goes down to 1.027. Does that actually cause the coral more stress? From my research, it does. That said, within 2 hours, the torch started to open back up and things started to look okay. So it wasn't a water parameter issue. It was clearly a salinity issue. Now, I'm going to monitor, in particular, this coral, these mushroom, and see if they start to come down. So I don't want to add any additional fresh water. As you see, guys, I don't really have a lot of room left to add water. I will if I need to. And so the idea is to get it again as low as possible. And I think we'll be able to achieve 1.026 by adding some additional fresh water, possibly tomorrow. But again, that's my lack of experience. People have been suggesting, our subscriber base has been suggesting, especially those of you guys that are more experienced, to get an automatic water top-off unit. And for those of you guys that are new, essentially what you do is you build a small reservoir. Either it's a small tank, and you can place it right beneath. You could probably even place it in here. And then you run some lines in, and it has a little sensor. And as the water drops below the sensor, it automatically dispenses fresh water into the tank. So it's a very good lesson for me, because it would have been a hard lesson. Now imagine I wasn't home to top up that water and I had been on vacation. Like, how high before, your organisms really, before you can't save them, right? I mean, clearly we have a stressed out mushroom. I had noticed this previously, but I had not given it any thought. It's the fact that all of the other coral were impacted and looked to be stressed that really triggered me to really start, wait a second, there's something not right here. And I think the best position that we can be in as new reefers is to get into the habit of testing. This is what I'm learning from our community. Testing regularly, documenting what's going on in your tank through your tests. That's ultimately what's going to make you successful in the long run with respect to keeping a healthy tank, right? What I'm trying to avoid here and help those of you guys that are new is to get into the routine of maintaining your tank, testing it regularly, and not rushing the process. Because with saltwater reef keeping, or when you're keeping a marine tank, it's quite different than a freshwater tank in the sense that you have to be more patient. When you get a freshwater tank, you just fill it with water, put some conditioner in, let the tank cycle, and you can add your livestock. And in terms of maintaining the ecosystem, it is simpler. In a smaller nano tank, again, we have to give consideration to what we're putting in, how many different types of organisms they are, and how they impact the overall balance of the ecosystem. So that's what we're doing here, guys, is we're learning to maintain an ecosystem, and we're trying to do so without making mistakes. So those mistakes in this hobby, especially when you're running a nano tank, can crash your whole system. And from my understanding, salinity is one thing that can take out your livestock and your coral super quick. Now, guys, if you've had that happen to you, let us know in the comments, like what was the experience? Were you away? Did the automatic top off unit fail? What sorts of things can you recommend to prevent, a salinity spike, right? My friend Brandon, who's pretty experienced, he uses the Hana electronic salinity checkers, and he says it's convenient. He just dips it in, boom, gives him the reading. I use a refractometer, right, which is a scientific instrument to measure salinity, and it's very accurate. And I'm happy that I paid $85. And at my local fish store, the staff, I remember kind of regretting it at first. Oh man, maybe I should have paid, $35 and got the one from Amazon. And the reason I bought the one he had suggested was because it was a scientifically accurate refractometer. And now I'm thinking, wow, that was worth it. Because it helps detect these issues. And if you can prevent them, you better bet your bottom dollar that I may be testing my salinity far more often. It was, one of our subscribers, I should say, had said, oh, you can probably get away with it like once a month because you have a lid on. Part of my mistake here, guys, I think came down when I did my last water change. I actually didn't leave enough room for the water, for a freshwater top up. So next time I do a water change, maybe I'll bring, fill it up to here and allow for enough room so that I'm able to top up my water with fresh water and bring down the salinity levels. So that's a bit of a learning experience for me. But that said, guys, that's why we're here. We're here to learn from each other. If you're new and you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Click the button down below. And for everyone else that's continuing to support the channel and, provide that positive feedback and guidance for those of us that are new. Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert resource here. I'm simply highlighting my experience in the hobby as I'm learning it. And I'm trying to avoid problems that will, avoid them so that I'm able to teach others that are new and they can learn from these experiences. So again, thanks so much, guys. And that's it for today. As I said, we're going to make some changes here in the next videos, and that's going to include, coral placement and, getting this tank, getting the coral into positions whereby they're going to be more successful. Again, I like how my hammer is looking. I'm going to move our zoas and the candy cane lower in the tank. And we're going to see how that goes, and we're going to continue to keep an eye on our mushroom. Again, thanks so much for your support, guys. And that's it for this one.